Now, I know I've recently said that 2021 is the year of the bird, but that's only because reptiles have managed to fly under the competitive radar. But if we're comparing them to how they were at the start of the year, reptiles are the absolute winner there. I mean, before Ogdoadics came out, Snake Rain was only theoretically good, but it didn't really have any targets, while now they're just putting Snake Rain targets as TCG pack filler exclusives. We've gotten an entirely new reptile archetype that can actually combo and search a card that's a Foolish Burial attached to a monster reborn. Then aliens became a worthy inclusion thanks to their 2-card Floodgate, and now Reptiliannes are being completely overhauled with some amazing new cards. So of course, just like with everything else reptile type, it's going to get shoved straight into an Ogdoadic deck, which is slowly becoming an amalgamation of all the best parts of every reptile deck. Venom's next, maybe? First off, I'm basing this deck off of my last Ogdoadic deck, which should be linked as a card thingy around about now. You don't have to watch it, but if you do, it'll give you a good idea of what the combos used to be like, so that you can see what foundation we're basing this off. Anyway, this support changes the deck quite dramatically, fixing a few of its weakest areas. Going first, you'll still have one main objective, to summon Bishbalkan, spawn a ton of tokens, and then gain a ton of advantage while finishing on the alien lock. Well, luckily this version of the deck can still do that, with a few minor differences, and it can do it a lot more consistently. You see, before, you basically needed Nunu or Snake Rain to do it, but now there are so many more combinations of cards that allow you to do it that it means that it doesn't feel like you're only really getting to play the deck properly in 1 in every 3 hands. Also, you no longer need to run a bunch of cards that are useless in anything other than that combo. No more Performer Power Lizards or Masked Chameleon, luckily enough. This makes the deck a bit less of a mess, and means that you can actually put up at least a few interruptions with every board. But the other big shift with this deck is that now it'll play very differently when going first versus going second. The Reptilianne cards all interact with your opponent's monsters, either reducing their monster's attack to 0 to enable way more interesting plays and combo lines, or just by allowing you to steal them as their field spell. This is of course pretty tricky to show off with test hands, and is more something that you'll be improvising on a case-per-case basis, so I focus more on what you can do going first, but just remember that now, when going second, you have a ton of options available to you. With that said, let's now take a look at this new Reptilianne support. They got 5 new cards, and I'm happy to announce that they're all pretty good. First, let's look at their 2 main deck monsters, Coatl and Nyami. Nyami's sort of a hand trap, but it requires you to already have reptiles in your graveyard, so really it's just a monster that you'll be activating from the hand. Unless your opponent mills your deck, I suppose. Anyway, it can reduce the attack of an opponent to 0, which is very useful for all the other Reptilianne support we'll soon be looking at. Its other effect is that, if they have a monster with 0 attack on the field, it can summon itself back from the graveyard, but it's one effect or the other per turn, not both. So basically this card is either an extender, good for tributing or linking into Zerol, or support for the rest of your deck, comboing especially well with the field spell. Now, if Nyami was good, then Coatl is amazing. This is probably the single most useful piece of support that Ogdoadics could get, even just from its stats alone. You see, it's a dark, level 4 reptile tuner. So we can boot out Masked Chameleon and just play this card instead. And unlike Masked Chameleon, it actually has an effect that doesn't just hinder you. In fact, its effect is what makes the stupid combos this deck is known for possible, without running tricky pendulum cards. And maybe, if all goes well, we'll never need to pendulum summon again. Its effect allows it to special summon itself if you control a dark reptile, which shouldn't be difficult at all. The fact that it needs a reptile and not specifically a Reptilianne is amazing for giving these 2 archetypes synergy together, since half of the Ogdoadics are dark anyway. After summoning itself, it can then summon as many Reptiliannes as you want from your hand, equal to the amount of monsters with 0 attack your opponent controls. Remember Bishbalkan's effect? Yeah, so this just summons every Reptilian from your hand at that point in the combo. It's even the right level for it to work with Nyami to make a Hydra, so you'll be drawing your 5 cards too. It even has an effect to work as a non-tuner for a reptile synchro, so you can use it with itself to make their new boss monster if necessary. Speaking of her, here's Reptilianne Melusine, a level 8 reptile synchro that requires a reptile tuner. In this deck, it'll always have its destruction protection, so that's a nice little bonus. Its main effect, however, is an interesting one. Once per chain, it can target an opponent's monster and make its attack 0, as long as your opponent activates the monster effect. It's not the strongest form of interruption or anything, and it doesn't stop your opponent from normal summoning something strong to beat over your alien kid, but it does help with survivability and making your other cards live, especially the field spell. This card isn't a priority to make, but it's a nice bonus. So let's look at this field spell. It has 2 effects, and they both can be relevant. The first is to destroy a 0 attack monster on your field, to revive a dark reptile from your graveyard. Now this has a few problems. Firstly, neither Coatl or Nyami have 0 attack, so you'll probably be using a token or an Ogdoadic for this effect. Secondly, your best main deck monsters are light, not dark, so you don't usually gain too much advantage out of this. In a pure Reptilianne deck, you'd probably try to use this on a Gardener, I suppose, but that card didn't make the cut here. Its second effect allows you to take control of a 0 attack monster that your opponent controls once they activate a monster effect, in exchange for giving them a reptile token. It's once per turn, and it's a shame it gives them a token, but it steals the monster forever, so that's something. Since the monster you steal has to have 0 attack, you can then use it as fodder for the first effect. You'll get the most mileage out of this card if you have Melusine on your field or Nyami in the hand, so if you won't have either of those in your hand at the end of the turn, don't bother searching this. But how would you search this anyway? Well, I've been saving the best until last. Reptilianne Ramifications is an amazing card which, at the cost of a discard, allows you to choose not 1 but 2 of the 3 possible effects. Those effects are either to search a Reptilianne monster, to search a Reptilianne spell or trap, or to make an opponent's monster's attack 0, which doesn't target. Going first or second, it's a great effect, giving easy access to Coatl for combos or Nyami for her hand effect, and maybe even Lamia to make a devastating synchro summon of Hydra. This card is even better if you take into account Reptilianne Spawn. Search it with discard, and then banish a Reptilianne from your graveyard to spawn 2 tokens, which is either a free Ogdoadic king or queen, or just easy materials for Zerol, who can just use tokens. So as you can see, this new support is, well, amazing. It gives the deck tons of new options, allows ridiculous combos like before, but also allows you to react when your opponent already has something on the board. So let's look at how to put all of that together into a deck now, shall we? If you don't want to have to rebuild this deck yourself, check out my Patreon linked down below. This and all future decks will be available even at the lowest tier, so go check it out. It's convenient for you, and helpful for me. Before we go any further, allow me to preface this deck list by saying that it's by no means perfect. There are tons of options for which direction you can take this deck, depending on what you want to focus on the most. So instead of pretending that this is the absolute best version of Reptilianne Ogdoadics, I'm just going to say that it's the one that worked best for me. But I'll also be telling you about many adjustments that you can make to the deck to change things up a bit as we go over each card, so make sure to stick around for that. First, let's start with the Reptiliannes. Coatl is definitely a 3 of, since it does so much for the deck, and drawing it only adds to the amount of comboing you can do, since it can even summon itself as its own effect. I then opted for 2 Nyami and 1 Lamia, my reasoning being that Nyami's useful to get into the graveyard with Snake Rain, but also to search with Echidna's effect, so you'll want at least 2. But it doesn't combo that well with the rank 4 and rank 8 focus of the extra deck, so 3 is probably a bit bricky. Feel free to try it out 3 though, since it's great going second. Then the 1 Lamia, since it's really only useful as part of your main combo, or occasionally going second, so extra copies aren't really needed. Reptilianne Ramifications is an obvious 3 of, since it'll give you what you want while hopefully discarding a high level Ogdoadic. I then only run 1 recoil, since it's only really good as a risky going second play, or more often if you know that you can end on Melusine and this card. Then I also only run 1 Reptilianne Spawn, which took a long time for me to decide on, especially since it's not even a once per turn. The thing is, starting with discard isn't always good, since you might not actually get to your Reptilianne engine until it's too late for it to really help you, and by then there's not really a lot you can do as the tokens besides tribute them for an Ogdoadic. Ideally, you want to search this with Ramifications, allowing you to push for more rank 8 negates early on, or unbrick weird hands so that you can at least end on a Zerol and Alien Kid. Do feel free to try this at 2 or 3, but until we get better reptile links, I think 1 is fine. Now for the Ogdoadics. To start off as the high level ones, I think keeping 1 of each is still the right move in general. They each offer something to the deck, be it an easy summon of a level 8 monster, a combo piece, or just a boss monster. You also do need to discard often in this deck, so with these you'll usually have something you actually do want to discard, which is nice. Overlord is the one I considered cutting the most, since it takes 3 tributes, it's a light attribute, and it sends everything on the field that didn't come from the graveyard, including your alien lock, so it's difficult to really justify it, but its main power comes from turn 3 onwards, where you can just use something like Water Lily to bring it back and wipe boards to hopefully set up for an 80k. So for that reason, I think it's still worth it. Also, you could choose just 1 between King and Queen if you wanted less level 8 monsters, since both of them are fairly equal in power level anyway. The rest are 3 Noya, 3 Nunu, and 1 Zoha, as usual. As for the aliens, as much as I wanted to run more, they're only really here as a slightly unnecessary safety protection, so taking up more deck space than strictly necessary just seemed wrong. You run 1 Kid, 1 Stealth Buster, and then an A-Cell recombination device, Kid being there for the basic lock that you aim for along with Zavol in your extra deck, and Stealth Buster is there to be a target for the quick play spell, letting you negate your opponent's normal summon effects, or something else if Kid gets taken care of, and then later providing disruption. Finally, Nightsword Serpent found its way into the deck at the last minute, being a TCG exclusive revealed in the pack openings. It's already decent now as a Snake Rain target, giving you an extra level 4 body on the field, but it will stop Nunu from being able to summon itself from the graveyard sadly, so it's not quite a free rank 4 by itself. If you already have a ton of reptiles in the graveyard, it also turns Water Lily from 1 into 2 monsters special summoned, so that can be a nice swing in your favour in later turns. This card will only get more useful with Ogdoadic Flood in Battle of Chaos, along with the other good support for this deck that comes in that set, so I suppose I'll have to update the deck again. For the hand traps, I went for Ash Blossom, and then Ghost Bell for a bit of graveyard protection. This deck loses extremely hard even to a DD Crow if timed well, so it's kinda necessary to be able to actually do something about that. For spells, it's easy, 3 Snake Rain, 3 Water Lily, and a Monster Reborn. The first 2 are some of the best reptile support, while the Monster Reborn is great to draw off the Hydra's draw 5, usually getting you an Ogdoadic boss monster on top of your end board. Now for the extra deck, the space is pretty tight as usual in this deck. There's 2 categories for the cards that I'll go over. Firstly, the cards necessary for the full combo, and then the cards that are either for extending further with good hands, or just other options that you can go for. The first 9 cards are the ones necessary for the combo, and they're arranged in the order that you summon them. They are King of the Feralymphs, Geomathmech Magma, Fish Balkan, Reprodocus, Echidna, Link Spider, Sayuja, Hydra, and then Zavol. Instead of going over each of these, just watch the first combo I'll be showing, because you get to see them all in action. Hydra and Zavol do have some applications outside of the combo though. Going second, with some backup from Lamia, Hydra can sometimes help in breaking boards, since the 2 monster effects can chain block each other. If you make the destruction and drawing chain link 1 instead of 2. Zavol is now a lot easier to make even with bad starting hands, so getting the Kid and Zavol lock is usually your top priority, unless you want to focus on rank 8s. Speaking of, we run 3 of those. Hope Harbinger for the spell negation, Zombie Stein to negate any face-up card as a quick effect, and then Dingirsi for protection and non-targeting removal. Chaos Ruler helps you make them, milling your deck and adding a card to your hand, and then can summon itself back by banishing a light and a dark, giving you another level 8 monster for your Xyz plays. Melusine is a fairly easy one to add onto your end board, as long as you got a Nyami into your graveyard at any point of the main combo, and then Shock Trooper was a very late inclusion, being replaced by a second King of the Feralymphs until very recently. You see, without Unchained Abomination, which is replaced now by Sayuja since that gives you another special summon and makes Alien Kid harder to out, there just isn't really a good way to destroy this card on demand, so you won't really get its secondary effect off. But it turns out it is still useful. Firstly, you can discard a high level Ogdoadic to get it in the graveyard, spreading A counters in the process. Then, if you do, you can actually use the Zavol to remove those counters to summon an Alien Kid, freeing up Sayuja's summon for an Ogdoadic King, Queen, or Overlord. Now you could still try to include Abomination. There are some weird lines of play with it, Shock Trooper and the Field Spell, which allow you to gain a ton of extra advantage, but it's such a niche play that it didn't really seem worth it. Talking of niche plays, if you really wanted to focus on Reptiliannes, a Viper could maybe be worth thinking about as a follow-up play for turn 3. You'd search it during your turn with Echidna, and then normal summon it to steal something from your opponents on the follow-up turn. Again, too niche to really be worth it, unless you're trying to go full Reptilianne. Finally, hand trap protection is definitely worth considering, with Call by the Grave or Designator. For Designator, you'll need to make sure you're running whichever hand traps are most common in the format for it to be useful, so it will be hard to fit in without a few sacrifices. So that's the deck. Now let's see it in action. If you've been enjoying the video so far, make sure to give it a like and subscribe to the channel. I'll be updating this deck again with Battle of Destiny, so stick around for that. Anyway, this first replay is the 1.5 card combo that you'll be aiming for most of the time just for the sheer advantage it gets you. All you need is Nunu and a reptile discard. Here we're using Yami, but we'll be ignoring its graveyard effect just to show that it does work with everything. Start by using Nunu to send Zoha, and then discard your reptile to add Zoha to your hand. Normal summon it, and then use Nunu's graveyard effect to bring it back, and then overlay them into a King of the Feral Imps. We'll search Noya, who then discards itself to send a Curse. Tribute the Xyz to summon Curse, and then Noya, and then use Noya's effect to search Water Lily. Now Water Lily can send Keratal, and then revive it at the same time since you had 5 reptiles in the graveyard. You then synchro summon a Magma and then a Bish Balkan, who'll just flood the entire field with tokens. Turn 2 of them into a Reprodocus, make the token below it into a reptile, turn 2 more into an Echidna, and then make a Link Spider, and then link everything else except Echidna into a Yugioh. You can now use Echidna's effect to search a Keratal, a Yami, an Alien Kid, a Lamia, and then the 5th card can be whatever you want. Keratal can summon herself, and then summon the other Reptilianne straight from your hand. Synchro summon a Hydra to draw 5 cards while clearing your opponent's tokens, and then link into a Zavol, who gets to search Recombination Device. Then Yugioh can special summon your Alien Kid, and you can set the Quick Play spell to be able to negate your opponent's normal summons effects. You've now got your Floodgate set up, backed up by another negate just in case, and you've drawn 6 cards, so you've probably got a few more interruptions as well. Now, while that combo is flashy, it's also pretty fragile, and weak to spell and trap disruption. So now here's a test hand to show what you can do if you want to focus on rank 8 monsters instead. Start with Ramifications, since that can discard your level 8 Ogdoadic to search a spawn and a Reptilianne monster. Then do the Nunu and Zoha combo just like in the last replay, making a King of the Feral Imps and then searching a Noya, and then you just keep going until you can summon Curse from the graveyard to get Nunu and search a Water Lily. With Water Lily, this time, you just bring back a level 8 Ogdoadic instead. Then summon Keratal to give yourself a tuner, and then synchro summon a Chaos Ruler. That will check the top 5 cards of your deck for a light or dark monster, and then can add it to your hand before milling the rest. Then you can use Spawn to make 2 tokens and tribute 2 of them for an Ogdoadic Queen. You can now tribute Chaos Ruler for Alert, we'll shuffle back 2 of your banished cards, and now Chaos Ruler can banish a light and a dark to summon itself back for another level 8 body. Now it's just a matter of making a Zombie Stein, a Hope Harbinger, and then leaving whichever level 8 Ogdoadic on the field you want to keep the effect of the most. I gave for Queen, since if your opponent sends a card from their hand or deck to the graveyard, you get to revive a light or dark reptile from your graveyard, so you'll probably end up with King on the field this way as well. Just as a side note, Zombie Stein and Hope Harbinger actually have a fairly decent synergy. Zombie Stein is forced into defense mode when it negates something, and it only has 1000 defense, so Hope Harbinger's attack redirection effect is actually pretty useful, preventing your opponent from simply beating over the Zombie Stein. If it does get destroyed though, you can make your Hope Harbinger gain Zombie Stein's attack, which happens to be 4500, so it's a pretty formidable amount. Another thing that's nice about this version of the deck is that you can sometimes make a non-reptile Xyz monster before you're locked into reptiles. This will usually require a hand that has something like Snake Rain, Reptilianne Ramifications, or both, since you really want those level 8 Ogdoadics in the graveyard, and then the tokens to be able to tribute them to get it back from the graveyard. Here, we do a combination of those two cards in order to make a Zombie Stein before summoning your Bish Balkan. Now, while that does only get 4 tokens on the field, it's actually fine. You can compensate with a Nyami in your graveyard to still have enough materials. And then when you get your Search with Echidna, you only actually need to search 4 cards anyway. Same goes for the zones. You can actually do your whole combo with only 3 free zones. The only thing you really miss out on is an extra draw, since there's 1 less token on the field, but you're drawing 4 cards anyway, so it's not a huge loss. After that, you basically finish your combo like usual, and now you have the Alien Floodgate backed up by Zombie Stein's Negate, which means you no longer lose to a single Raigeki. So that's most of what I have to say about the combo lines in this deck, but while making the video, I did so many test hands that it feels like a shame to let them go to waste. Also, Nightsword Serpent was only available in Edo Pro very recently, so it missed out on a lot of my testing, so I wanted to show that off too. So instead of letting those other test hands go to waste, I'll just be showing them off now to let you get a feel of what this deck's combos look like, and what options you have. So sit back, enjoy, and remember to like and subscribe. So that's the deck. It sure is something, isn't it? I hope you enjoyed watching it as much as I enjoyed making it. Tell me if you plan on trying it out, and while you're down there, remember to give the video a like and subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching!